My name is Hazel. I am 18 years old. If you were to scroll through the endless polished photographs of my family on the internet, you would see nothing but absolute perfection. You would see a breathtakingly flawless portrait of upper-class success. My father, Victor, is the chief executive officer of a prestigious financial investment firm, a man who strictly wears custom-tailored suits that cost upwards of $3,000 each. He is a man who commands rooms, dictates financial trends, and expects unquestioning obedience from everyone in his orbit. My mother, Diana, is a woman who has dedicated every waking hour of her adult life to curating and maintaining an illusion of high society dominance. She spends her days networking, attending exclusive luncheons, and managing a social media presence with tens of thousands of followers who hang on to her every perfectly filtered post. And then, there is Stella. My sister is 19 years old, a reigning beauty queen, and the undisputed center of my parents' universe. Stella has never had to work for a single thing in her entire life. She was born with striking features and a demanding personality that my parents completely catered to, shaping their entire existence around her pageant schedules and social calendar. And me? I am the invisible ghost operating in the background. I am the silent, unpaid assistant who ensures that their fragile house of cards never collapses. I do not attend their lavish tea parties, nor am I invited to stand in the front for their sparkling family holiday portraits. Instead, I manage the unglamorous reality of our household. I am the one who organizes my mother's chaotic digital calendar, ensuring she never double books her elite social engagements. I am the one who sorts through my father's overflowing email inbox, flagging important messages from his business partners. More importantly, I am the one who has written every single college admission essay, every history paper, and every homework assignment for Stella over the past 4 years. I am the data processor, the fixer, the invisible maid to their grand theatrical production. For 18 years, I accepted this miserable role for one incredibly foolish reason. I genuinely believed that if I worked hard enough, if I proved my undeniable usefulness, and if I achieved absolute academic perfection, I would finally earn a legitimate place at their table. I poured my soul into my textbooks, sacrificing sleep and a normal teenage life, until I officially earned the title of high school valedictorian. I thought my graduation day would finally be the one single moment where they looked at me and felt genuine pride. I was horribly, devastatingly wrong. The morning of my high school graduation arrived, and the air inside our massive estate was suffocatingly thick with tension. However, the anxiety buzzing through the hallways had absolutely nothing to do with me or my academic achievements. Diana was running frantically back and forth across the living room, aggressively holding up 3 different designer gowns. Stella was standing in the center of the room, complaining loudly about which dress would look best for her upcoming weekend spa retreat, which was apparently a mandatory preparation event for her next beauty pageant. My father was pacing near the grand staircase, speaking loudly into his phone, deeply engaged in a conversation with his primary business partner, Gideon. It was as if my graduation did not even exist on their radar. I stood quietly in the doorway of the living room, holding the printed draft of my valedictorian speech. I had stayed awake for 3 consecutive nights writing it, trying to balance my genuine thoughts with the acceptable, sanitized version of reality my parents required. Diana finally noticed me standing there. She snatched the paper from my hands, barely reading the words before heavily sighing. She aggressively uncapped a red pen and slashed through half of my paragraphs. She told me the speech was entirely too dry, far too clinical, and severely lacked any heartfelt appreciation for the family that had provided me with such a wonderful life. She explicitly commanded me to rewrite the entire second half to include heavy, glowing praise for my parents' unwavering support and my sister's inspiring presence. I swallowed the massive lump of resentment forming in my throat, nodded silently, and walked back to my bedroom to comply. While rewriting my speech to include those sickeningly sweet lies, I picked up the family tablet to synchronize my mother's daily schedule, just as I always did. It was a routine chore, but on that specific morning, something shifted inside me. A quiet, defensive instinct took over. I navigated deep into the settings menu of the tablet and discreetly enabled continuous location sharing, linking her device directly to the hidden tracking application on my personal phone. I did not know exactly why I was doing it at the time. Perhaps it was the ingrained survival instinct of a child who instinctively knows they are about to be abandoned. I printed the revised speech, heavily saturated with forced gratitude, and prepared myself for what was supposed to be the most important evening of my life. It was exactly 6:30 in the evening. I was standing nervously behind the heavy, dark red velvet curtains of the high school auditorium stage. The massive room was buzzing with the loud, joyful chatter of 3,000 students, parents, and faculty members taking their seats. My heart was pounding fiercely against my ribcage. I reached up and adjusted the heavy gold valedictorian medal resting against my collarbone. Slowly, I pulled the edge of the thick fabric back just a fraction of an inch, scanning the brightly lit room to find the very first row. Right in the center, there were 2 premium VIP seats clearly labeled with our family name. They were completely empty. Right at that exact second, the phone inside my robe pocket vibrated sharply. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. It was a text message from Diana. I stared at the screen, my eyes tracing the words over and over. She wrote that traffic on the interstate was an absolute nightmare. She stated that they had decided to turn the car around and drive Stella directly to her luxury spa retreat instead. She typed that this retreat was incredibly crucial for her pageant stress levels. The message ended with a casual remark that high school graduations were boring anyway, and that we would simply eat a celebratory cake tomorrow. There was no apology. There was no hint of remorse. There was just a cold dismissal of my entire existence. I did not cry. Instead, my hands moved automatically, opening the location tracking application I had secretly connected to her tablet that morning. A bright blue dot pulsed steadily on the digital map. They were nowhere near the interstate, and they were certainly not heading toward any spa resort in the mountains. The tracking coordinates showed them parked precisely at the most exclusive country club in the city, located exactly 1 hour away from my high school. They were attending a lavish evening gala, drinking expensive wine, and networking with Victor's wealthy business partner, Gideon. They had lied straight to my face. They had actively chosen a high society networking event over the culmination of my 12 years of relentless academic labor. In that split second, 18 years of buried resentment, silent suffering, and desperate yearning shattered completely. Every ounce of weakness evaporated from my body, replaced by a terrifying, absolute emotional absolute zero. The booming voice of Principal Gallagher echoed through the massive auditorium speakers, silencing the restless crowd. He proudly announced my name, inviting the class valedictorian to the stage. I stepped out from behind the velvet curtain, the blinding stage lights hitting my face. I walked steadily toward the wooden podium, looking out over the sea of 3,000 expectant faces. I looked down at the empty chairs in the front row. I raised the carefully approved, entirely fabricated speech my mother had forced me to write. I held it up to the microphone, and with deliberate, agonizing slowness, I ripped the thick paper entirely in half. The sharp, violent sound of tearing paper echoed through the massive speakers like a gunshot. The entire auditorium fell into a stunned, breathless silence. I leaned into the microphone. I did not yell. I did not cry. Using a perfectly flat, clinical, and completely steady voice, I began to speak. I did not talk about our bright futures or following our dreams. I talked about those 2 empty chairs. I read aloud the exact global positioning coordinates of the elite country club where my parents were currently standing. I detailed the exact dinner menu of the gala they were attending. I exposed, with brutal precision, how I had spent the last 4 years ghostwriting every single academic paper for my golden child sister. I explained how my entire childhood was nothing more than an unpaid internship in data processing to maintain a fraudulent family empire. I looked directly into the crowd and told them to never, ever sacrifice their own sanity seeking validation from people who would not even bother to hold a seat for them. I stated that their perfection was a cheap theatrical production, and effective immediately, I was permanently resigning from my role. When I stepped away from the podium, there was no applause. The audience was entirely too paralyzed by shock. But as I walked past the corner of the stage, I saw Principal Gallagher standing in the shadows. He was holding his cellular phone up, the red recording light blinking steadily. He had captured every single word. If you are watching this and you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members to protect your own peace, please hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling me the name of the city you are living in right now. Every single comment helps this video reach more people who need to hear this message. Thank you so much. I did not stay for the celebratory reception after the ceremony. While my classmates were throwing their caps and taking photographs with their crying, proud parents, I pulled a cheap, prepaid burner phone out of my bag. I had asked my fiercely loyal best friend, Fiona, to purchase it for me with cash a week prior, just in case my paranoia turned out to be justified. I sent her a brief, urgent text message asking her to bring her car to the back entrance of the school immediately. Fiona drove me back to my incredibly silent, dark house. The massive estate felt exactly like a tomb. I knew that once the shockwave of what I had done finally hit my father, his retaliation would be absolutely apocalyptic. Victor never forgave anyone who dared to tarnish his public image. I walked quickly to my bedroom and grabbed a sturdy black backpack. I packed strictly for survival. I took my laptop, my encrypted external hard drives, my birth certificate, my passport, and exactly 5 changes of basic clothing. I deliberately left behind the expensive diamond necklace they had bought me for my 16th birthday. I took off the luxury watch they had given me for Christmas. I left all their expensive props sitting on my mattress. I left my primary smartphone sitting on the kitchen counter, ensuring they would have absolutely no way to digitally track my movements. When Fiona's headlights swept across the front window, I walked out the front door, locked it behind me, and did not look back. We sped away into the night, leaving behind 18 years of living like an invisible ghost. Fiona drove her car aggressively, pushing the speed limit for 4 straight hours through the pitch-black night. Crossing state lines was not a random choice, it was a highly calculated tactical maneuver. The local city police department was entirely in the pocket of my father. He regularly donated thousands of dollars to their pension funds, and I knew he would try to use them to drag me back home the second he realized I was missing. By crossing into a completely different state, I stripped those local officers of their direct jurisdiction. Our final destination was the heavily secured, modern home of my oldest brother, Julian. Julian was a brilliant software engineer who had officially disowned our parents the very second he turned 18 years old. He lived with his incredibly sharp, terrifyingly intelligent wife, Carmen, who worked as a senior executive in crisis public relations. When Fiona and I pulled into their driveway just before sunrise, Julian was already standing on the front porch waiting for us. He pulled me into a tight, genuine embrace, the first real hug I had experienced in years. A few hours later, as the morning sun finally broke through the windows, Carmen walked into the living room holding a cup of black coffee and wearing a dangerous, satisfied smirk. She picked up a remote control and turned on the massive television mounted on the wall. Principal Gallagher had not just recorded my speech, he had anonymously forwarded the footage to a prominent local journalist. Carmen showed me the statistics on her laptop. The video was rapidly climbing the trending charts. 2 million views. 5 million views. The entire internet was fiercely dissecting the absolute hypocrisy of the perfect wealthy family. Their meticulously crafted, untouchable public image was actively burning to the ground, and the fire was spreading fast. On Monday morning, Victor launched his inevitable counterattack. I opened my laptop and attempted to log into the private banking portal that held my dedicated college savings account, which consisted entirely of money my late grandmother had explicitly left in my name. A glaring red error message flashed across the screen. The account status read completely frozen. Victor had aggressively leveraged his personal relationships with the upper management of the bank to illegally lock me out of my own finances, attempting to starve me into submission. But freezing my bank account was only his opening move. Just before noon, Julian received a highly concerning phone call from an old colleague who currently worked within the admissions board of the prestigious university I was scheduled to attend in the fall. Victor had personally called the dean of admissions that morning. He had aggressively threatened to completely withdraw his annual pledge of $100,000 unless the university immediately revoked my acceptance letter. He fabricated a vicious story, claiming I was suffering from a severe psychological breakdown and required immediate, mandatory institutionalization. He was systematically attempting to obliterate every single pathway to my future, trying to force me to crawl back to him begging for mercy. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the loud, demanding chime of Julian's front doorbell echoed through the house. I checked the live feed from the exterior security cameras and saw 2 uniformed police officers standing on the porch. Victor had escalated his tactics to a dangerous new level. He had officially called emergency services and reported that I was dangerously unstable, actively suicidal, and in need of an involuntary psychiatric hold. His strategy was blatantly transparent. He wanted the authorities to forcibly drag me into a mental health facility, which would immediately discredit everything I had said in my viral speech and allow him to spin the narrative to the press that I was just a tragic, insane teenager making up vicious lies. However, Victor had severely underestimated the environment I was hiding in. Carmen had anticipated this exact maneuver. She calmly opened the front door, flanked by Julian's incredibly expensive, aggressive corporate attorney, who had been sitting in our living room since breakfast. The attorney immediately blocked the doorway, presenting the officers with legally binding documentation proving that I was of sound mind, and clearly explaining that this was a documented case of cross-border harassment by an estranged, wealthy abuser. Because the officers were operating completely outside of Victor's sphere of political influence, they had absolutely no legal grounds to force their way inside. They awkwardly apologized and returned to their vehicles. My father's weaponized police strike had completely failed. Later that same evening, the secure landline in Julian's home office rang loudly. Julian put the phone on speaker. Victor's voice echoed through the room, sounding exactly like grinding metal. It was cold, furious, and absolutely merciless. He delivered a brutal ultimatum. He demanded that I pack my bags, return to his house immediately, and sit in front of a camera to record a formal, public apology. He wanted me to tell the world that the pressure of final exams had caused me to hallucinate, and that everything I said on that stage was a complete fabrication. If I refused, he promised to not only permanently destroy my academic future, but also swore to use his massive corporate resources to completely bankrupt Julian's software company. I looked across the desk at Carmen. She slowly nodded her head and made a specific hand gesture, signaling me to follow the psychological script we had prepared. I forced my breathing to become shallow and ragged. I let out a pathetic, trembling sob into the phone receiver, perfectly mimicking the sound of a broken, terrified child giving up the fight. I told him through fake tears that I was so sorry, that I was scared, and that I would agree to do a live television interview to clear the family name, but only if he immediately unfroze my grandmother's inheritance money. Victor let out a dark, triumphant laugh and abruptly ended the call. He honestly believed he had easily crushed my rebellion. He had absolutely no idea he had just blindly walked straight into a catastrophic trap built by a master of public relations. On Tuesday night, Julian's living room was officially transformed into a digital war room. Victor had aggressively changed every single password to his personal and corporate accounts the moment my video went viral, firmly believing that would lock me out of his life. But he had completely forgotten one crucial detail. I was the one who had originally built and configured his private cloud storage servers 5 years ago. I knew every single backdoor, every hidden directory, and every structural vulnerability in his network. Julian quickly wrote a custom script to bypass the newly updated firewall protocols, and within 2 tense hours of coding, we successfully breached Victor's highly encrypted hidden archives. What we found buried in those folders went far beyond simple proof of their attendance at a country club gala. We did find the high-resolution photographs of my parents and Gideon drinking champagne at the exact minute my name was called on stage, but we also found something infinitely more explosive. We uncovered highly protected, heavily encrypted financial ledgers. Victor and Gideon had not just been networking at these exclusive events. They had been actively embezzling millions of dollars from their own private investors over the last 3 years, funneling the stolen capital through a complex web of offshore shell corporations. This was no longer just a viral story about toxic parenting and a ruined graduation. This was massive, federal-level corporate fraud. On Wednesday morning, Carmen activated her extensive media network. She bypassed all the gossip bloggers and directly contacted Valerie, a notoriously ruthless, incredibly sharp senior news anchor for the largest television network in the region. Valerie personally despised Victor's arrogant business practices and immediately jumped at the opportunity. Carmen and Valerie perfectly coordinated a deceptive narrative to present to my parents. They pitched the upcoming live broadcast to Victor as a heartwarming, exclusive reconciliation special, assuring him that I would be given a platform to formally apologize and restore the family honor. By Wednesday evening, massive satellite broadcasting trucks were parked outside a neutral television studio downtown. Victor and Diana stepped out of their black luxury sedan looking utterly triumphant. They were dressed impeccably, radiating an aura of untouchable arrogance. Stella trailed closely behind them, wearing heavy camera makeup and a perfectly tailored dress, eager to absorb whatever leftover attention she could get. They looked at me as I walked into the building alongside Julian, their eyes filled with a sickening mixture of pity and absolute disgust. I was holding nothing but a single, incredibly thin yellow manila folder. They confidently assumed it contained my handwritten, tearful apology. The studio director counted down from 5, and the red light on the primary broadcasting camera blinked to life. We were officially live on the air, broadcasting directly to millions of viewers across the state. Valerie opened the segment using a wonderfully deceptive, soft, and deeply empathetic tone. Diana immediately snapped into her practiced role of the heartbroken, loving mother, delicately dabbing at her completely dry eyes with a tissue. She spoke eloquently about how much pressure I had put on myself, and how the family had done nothing but shower me with endless love and support. Victor sat beside her, crossing his arms and adopting the posture of a stern but ultimately forgiving patriarch. And now, Hazel, I understand you have a statement you would like to make to your parents and to the millions of people watching tonight, Valerie said, smoothly turning the conversation and gesturing for the floor director to hand me a microphone. I took the microphone in my right hand. In that moment, all the background noise in the studio faded into absolute nothingness. I could only hear the slow, steady, powerful rhythm of my own heartbeat. I did not look at my parents. I stared directly into the black lens of the broadcasting camera. I did not shed a single tear. I did not offer a single word of apology. I slowly opened the yellow manila folder resting on my lap. First of all, I would like to address the terrible interstate traffic my mother mentioned in her text message, I said, my voice cutting through the silent studio like a razor blade. I pulled out the glossy, high-resolution photographs we had pulled from the server and laid them flat on the glass table. The overhead cameras immediately zoomed in, broadcasting the images to the world. It was Victor and Diana, laughing hysterically and holding up glasses of expensive champagne with Gideon. Clearly visible in the background of the photograph was the massive antique clock of the country club, displaying the exact time my graduation ceremony was taking place. Diana's face instantly drained of all color, turning a sickly, ghostly white. Victor lunged forward, desperately trying to snatch the photographs off the table, but I pulled them back out of his reach. And secondly, I continued, raising my voice to overpower his sudden shouts, pulling out a thick stack of printed financial ledgers. These frequent spa trips and country club galas were not just social events. They were cover meetings for massive corporate fraud. My father, Victor, and his partner have actively embezzled over $5 million from their private investors over the last 36 months. The television studio instantly erupted into absolute, unmanageable chaos. Valerie expertly pivoted, completely dropping her soft demeanor and immediately firing off rapid, devastating questions about the financial documents. Victor entirely lost his mind. He screamed at the camera crew to cut the feed, his face turning a dark, dangerous shade of purple. He violently lunged across the table, attempting to physically rip the microphone out of my hands. 2 large studio security guards had to sprint onto the set to physically restrain him. That horrifying, violent spectacle was broadcast live into millions of living rooms before the network finally scrambled to cut the transmission to a commercial break. The fallout from that live broadcast was absolutely catastrophic, and it happened with terrifying speed. Within 48 hours, Gideon panicked. In a desperate attempt to secure a plea deal and save himself from decades in prison, he fully cooperated with the authorities and handed over the remaining encrypted servers. Teams of federal agents and financial investigators raided Victor's corporate headquarters, carrying out dozens of boxes of evidence. The investment firm collapsed into immediate bankruptcy. Diana found herself entirely excommunicated. Her wealthy social circle treated her like a contagious disease, instantly blocking her phone number and removing her from every elite guest list. Stella, completely unable to pass her university classes without me ghostwriting her assignments, was caught purchasing essays online and faced immediate academic expulsion. Thanks to the aggressive work of Julian's attorney, my bank accounts were permanently unfrozen, and my university acceptance was securely locked in place. I changed my legal name, destroyed my old phone, and severed every single remaining tie to my past. Today, I am sitting on the quiet, sunlit balcony of Julian's house, drinking a warm cup of coffee and breathing in the sweetest, most absolute freedom I have ever known. So, I have to ask you. Am I the bad guy for systematically burning their fraudulent empire to the ground just to prove a point? Should I have just read that fake, sickeningly sweet speech, endured their emotional abuse in silence, and kept the peace like a good, invisible daughter? Thank you for watching and listening to my story. Welcome to ProRevenge. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please hit that button right now to join our community. We will continue exploring stories about reclaiming your personal power, exposing toxic truths, and setting absolute, unbreakable boundaries in your life. Protect your peace at all costs, guard your future fiercely, and I will see you in the next video.